What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Ultra Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Corcione, and today we are doing a Q&A episode. Yes, we are answering your questions that you submitted that I have over here, and we are going to cover a lot of topics. Now, we got a lot of questions, and some of the topics we're going to cover today, I bunched them into 3 separate categories, which I think is going to be super, super cool. So, one, we're going to talk about 100-mile training tips and strategies and things to do when you're training or even picking an 100-mile race to do. We're going to talk about some things in strength and mobility for ultra runners, which has been a big thing that I've been super passionate about lately. And then we're also going to talk about shoes when it comes to shoe selection on the trails, what to do for a shoe rotation, should you use carbon plated trail shoes or not. We're going to talk about all that. Now, if you submitted a question and it doesn't get covered on here, we're going to be doing another episode covering your questions there too. So we're going to get to everybody's questions. So if it's not covered in here, we're going to cover it on the next one. So it's going to be a jam-packed episode. I'm excited to go through it with you, and let's get ready to rock and roll. But before we dive into this episode, I have to give a huge shout out to a tool that I've been using in my training for 2 years at this point. And it's been an absolute game changer for me because, I think one of the biggest things that can really be a shame in training is muscle soreness. Muscle soreness sucks. And let's be honest, when we're running really long miles, whether it's a long run, a long race, anything as such, our muscles can get prone to get sore. And when our muscles are sore, we can't train as hard or go back to training as soon as we wanted to. We feel a little bit more sluggish out there. And if we're in the middle of a race, we might not be able to hit the paces that we want to. So that's why I use Plan Pain Relief Spray, because what it is a all natural topical pain relief spray where you spray it on your muscles and it actually reduces inflammation in a matter of seconds. This is different than other topical pain relief products like CBD cream or Icy Hot, because those just cool the skin of the surface. This gets rid of inflammation on the source. I use this at Arizona Monster. I use it at all my races over the past 2 years, and it's been one of my favorite tools that I've used in my arsenal, in training, in racing, and it has helped me to stay strong and bounce back after hard training sessions, hard races, and overall feel really good. So if you want to give it a try, you can go to planrelief.com and use code EverydayUltra for 20% off your order. That's planrelief.com with code EverydayUltra for 20% off your order. Give it a try and let me know what you think. All right, now let's get in this episode. Let's start with question number 1 here. And we're going to talk about 100-mile specific questions first, and then we will go through the line of the topics that I mentioned first. So let's talk about some 100-mile specific questions that you guys sent in. Let's go. All right, first question on here too. How do you structure long runs when training for a 100-mile race? Now, this is a very, very good question. So I think when structuring long runs, I think the most important thing that you need to look at is what is the course that you are training for. And I think the most important thing is trying to get those long runs to be as specific to that course that you're training for when it comes to I'm going to go more when you're like really in that volume building phase. So I'll kind of talk about it more specifically towards them. But you'll really want to be in a position where you're trying to get as specific to the course that you're training for. So if you're running on an ultramarathon that might be flatter trail, then doing a long run on flatter trail might be helpful. If you're doing a mountainous 100-mile race, then you might want to go on the mountains too. But there's a really specific way that I like to structure these long runs, just in terms of like how to kind of put it out. So a few things when I'm coaching athletes where I usually like to direct them on long runs. The first thing is trying to match the elevation profile of the long run as similar to the race if possible. So if there's a 100-mile race where maybe you have a lot of like long climbs and long descents, then doing a long run with a long climb and a long descent, or several of them, might be the useful option. If it's something that's dead flat, then you might want to be doing a dead flat race. One of the most important reasons for this is because it helps with just the overall biomechanical nature of like the running patterns that you're doing out there. So like a mistake that I see some people make is if they're doing a flat ultra, they run a lot of vert. And not to say it's a bad thing, but when you're running flat for long periods of time, that actually starts to chew up on your body a little bit more than if you were going up and down and up and down and up and down. Conversely, if you're going up and down and up and down, like that downhill motion, like you're going to need that conditioning in your quads to handle all that downhill. So if you're just running flats all the time, it's not going to be as productive. So you try to match the elevation profile as close as you can to the race if possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, probably won't be perfect, but it's as close as possible. If there's elevation gain in your race, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the feet per mile over the total route of the given race that you were training for, and you're going to try to hit that in a similar realm of what you plan to do on your run in terms of elevation gain. So let's just say you're training for an 100 miler with a 10,000 feet of vertical gain. You'll take that vertical gain, divide it by the mileage, which is 100, which is going to be 100 feet per mile over average vert per mile for the route itself. So let's just say you're doing a long run and you're estimating to go out there for 20 miles. You're going to want to take that 20 miles, multiply it by 100, right? So 20 times 100, and that's going to be 2,000 feet of vert in that as well too. Now, that's just like a general principle of where you want your weekly mileage and vertical gain to be. You want your vertical gain and mileage to match up to that vert per mile gain, because that's going to mean you're adequately trained in terms of your uphill and downhill conditioning for the given race. And doing that on your long runs is a good way to practice. So that's the second thing on there. And the third thing is, I don't think you really need to focus until really close to the race, but it's still an important thing to do, is to test out your gear that you plan to use for the race. So if you're going to have a heavy pack out there, you might want to wear a heavy pack filled with all your stuff. If you're going to be using handholds and a belt, you might want to be using handholds and a belt. So it's like practicing all those things. So that's like the logistical side of things that I usually like to structure on long runs for athletes. And I like to do those a little bit earlier if possible, because that way, if you're trying to figure out a gear thing, or maybe you feel a little bit weaker on the downhills or the climbs, or maybe just overall you just need to build flat running durability, you get to like iron those things out really early in the block and have more time to reiterate down the line. Now, in terms of like the duration or how many miles are going to be out there, now for me, like for ultra marathons, I tend to program more on the side of time on feet as opposed to mileage. And the general reason for this is because there's a lot of variation when it comes to ultra marathons in terms of terrain, in terms of, you know, what a mile is compared versus another. So like, for example, like if you do a 20-mile long run on flat, it's going to be a way different stimulus than 20-mile long run on ups and downs and ups and downs. And so I think because of that, I usually like to go by hours. And so with those hours, generally with the long run, now the most important thing is that you want to build your long runs gradually. And so you don't want to like go from 1 week doing a 2-hour long run to then the next week doing a 5-hour long run. That's just like a big, big jump if you are like just starting out. You want to also take into consideration like how long you ran before and where you're currently at like in your training now. So for example, if you have, let's just say you're running 3 hours for your long run. If you have never done more than a 3-hour long run, I tend to say for the next long run, you might want to increase by 20 or 30 minutes only, not to like overly jump up. Now, if you've done 3-hour long runs before and you've done way more than that, you can go from 3 hours 1 week to 4 hours in the next week, just because your body's a little bit more conditioned to that. So I think that's like the biggest thing on what to do when you're determining how quick to ramp up those long runs. So that's the biggest thing on there. Now, so in terms of like what wasn't a question asked, but I'm sure it's like kind of the thing people's in their head is like, oh, like what's the longest long run that I should do? And I have a I don't want to give like a cop out answer to it, but really the answer is it depends. And it doesn't just depend on like your training levels and everything as such too. It also depends on what you want to work on. And I think doing like at least having like one really long run in your training, for most people who I do 100 miles, usually their longest long run is probably going to be anywhere around 4 to 7 hours. Now here's the thing, the longer the run generally means the hillier the course. Or here's the other thing too, if someone is a little bit on the like they're taking just a little bit more time out there just to rack up the miles, I actually might do a longer long run just so you can get the mileage count up a little bit more too. Whereas like if you look at someone who's like, you know, maybe ripping like 8-minute miles, like you're probably going to have a lower duration, because if you put them on like a 7-hour long run on a flat course, like the mileage just might get like a little out of it. So that's like one thing you kind of got to balance. But 4 to 7 hours is a general gauge. Now, like whether or not you go like longer or whether or not you go shorter on the long run, and here's the other option is like if you go short on the long run, you might opt for back-to-back long runs instead of one singular long run. You got to weigh out one equation for yourself. And the thing is there's usually 3 things that I usually say favor a longer long run. So the first thing is if you are durability limited, meaning like your legs get really like beat up after a certain point, and you want to be able to break past that, then doing longer long runs singular are going to be better. I'll give you an example. So like for me, when I was training for Javelina 100, I've done that race 3 times in a row. And for the first 2 years that I did it, I was getting like really sore around like mile 35 or so. Granted, the first year that I ran it, I kind of paced it a little bit off. But 35 was always kind of like the spot where my legs started to get sore. So I actually went out and did a 40-mile long run to kind of break through that adaptation a little bit more. Now, again, in that realm, I'm talking about going by mileage, and I think that's a useful realm to go. So, like, for example, like if you had like never gone past 30 miles before, it might be useful for you to do maybe a 40-mile long run or a 50-mile long run. Like, but again, you want to use that sparingly and you want to make sure that it goes through on these things as well. So if you're durability limited, and I would say this too, like most people, like if you get sore after mile 50, I wouldn't probably suggest against doing maybe like a 60 or 70-mile long run. Like 50 is like the absolute cap that I would put something on. And even so, that's in a very, 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 very rare situation. For the most part, from a mileage perspective, I usually like to have the longest run be anywhere, between 25 to 40 miles, like for most 100-mile races, if we're just talking in terms of mileage itself. But all that being said, like if you're durability limited and you're like getting like that soreness 40 miles or below, then you might want to do maybe a run up to that. Just make sure that number one, you're recovered well going into it and you give some time to recover after that too. And you don't put it too close to the taper because you don't want to do a super, super long run and then be super beat up going into the taper and then not be fully recovered going into the race. So something to keep in mind. But anyways, that was a big tangent. But number one, are you durability limited? And is there a certain point early in a race where you get sore that you can break past in training? That's number one. Number two is how's your nutrition strategy? If your nutrition strategy is a little bit more off, the longer the long run is going to benefit you more because you get more time to practice that nutrition over that longer period of time. So that's another thing that favors into it too, is nutrition and hydration strategy and holding up over periods of time. And then the third thing is more in the realm of confidence, right? Like I always ask my athletes, and this is a good question to ask yourself, is what would have to be true for you to feel the most confident going into this race? And for some athletes, like for example, I'm coaching someone who's doing his first 100 miler right now, and I asked him this question. And before that, the longest long run he'd ever done was a 50K. And I remember him telling me, he was like, I would feel really confident if I could go at least half the distance for this 100 miler. So I said, okay, great. Well, let's pick a date, and we're going to have this be your longest long run, and we're going to do 50 miles out there. Now, again, this is a very niche situation, but also at the same time, like, for him, 50 miles was worth it to get that like conceptual thing around like, oh, I know what it takes for me to go halfway on this. Now, again, the longest long run doesn't have to be a long run. It can be a race. Like you can sign up for a 50-mile race as a tune-up or a 50K race or anything of the such too as a tune-up race. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a training run, but that's another thing too, is like if going longer is going to help with your confidence, you can go with there as well. But like I said before, like the cap that I do for a 100-mile long run is probably going to be 50 miles, or if we're talking in terms of hours, I mean, it's really going to depend on pace, but generally 50 miles, like if we're just talking strict mileage, is usually the cap I would put for the longest long run for a 100-miler. Now, if you have all those things down and you're like, well, all those things I'm confident on, so what should I do instead? That's where I really love back-to-back long runs. So if you're not as durability limited and you also want to be your nutrition's great and you feel confident to go the distance, I like back-to-back long runs because like, here's the thing to think about. If you're doing 1 8-hour long run, that's going to be way harder on your body than if you're doing 2 back-to-back 4-hour runs. So back-to-back runs, long runs, give you the opportunity to stack in more volume while also balancing a little bit more recovery because you generally get, that big break in recovery in between when you're doing, let's just say Saturday and Sunday, right? Like you finish that 4 hours on Saturday, then you have all the way until the next day to do that 4 hours. You get those recovery benefits in between while still getting a good stimulus because you're getting 8 hours in a condensed period of time. So that's how I would kind of look at just putting together those specific long runs for that as well too. And again, in those long runs, you're doing the things that I mentioned, course specific as possible, anything that's such too. Now, here's the thing, the most important thing above all, I know I kind of went through a whole bunch of stuff here, but the most important thing to think about is fitness above all. So let's just say like you live in an area that you're limited by hills or terrain or anything of the such too. The most important thing is that you're getting the time on feet. Of course, you're going to want to get in hills and elevation, and you can do those things on treadmills and stuff like that too. But let's just say you're just like confined to those things or like maybe just not able to do those things. The most important thing is getting in those time on feet sessions out there too. So if it's not exactly perfect or you're getting in a little bit less vert per mile, that's okay. There's ways to make it up by if you maybe doing some treadmill workouts during the week, or maybe you do your long run and after that you go on the treadmill and park that incline up and just boost your elevation gain that way. Like there's some ways to kind of slice and dice it on there too. But that's how I would look at structuring long runs when you're training for a 100-mile race and looking at it like that. So yeah, so there's that. That was a very long answer, but hope that helps. Yeah, long runs are a very interesting topic, but that's what I would say on there too. Next question. What is good peak mileage for a 100-mile race? So I'll kind of give an answer of what I tend to do again from time on feet. That's usually the metric that I like to go with a lot. And then I'll kind of go from some mileage stuff too, because I know some people do it on mileage. Again, I program more by time on feet because I think it's a little bit more efficient in terms of ultra marathons too. But I think the biggest thing to always think about is what I like to refer to as the minimum maximum principle. Now, this principle is also used by Jason Koop. It's also used by the USCA ultra running certification, which I have and all of our coaches have on our team. But I have a little bit of like nuances and caveats to that the certification doesn't cover that I've seen work really, really well for athletes in my own training and also who I've coached as well too. So the minimum maximum principle states for a 100-mile race, you need to have at least 9 hours per week of running for your peak 6 weeks of training before the taper. So at least 9 hours a week of running for your peak 6 hours of week. Sorry, geez, tongue twister there. 9 hours a week of running for your peak 6 week of training before the taper. Now, the caveat with this is that the certification includes this for specific 100-mile races, but also the same rule applies for 100K races. And that's where I kind of differ a little bit on that. Like, I think if you're going to do 9 hours for 100K, like, I don't think it's always as one-to-one similar to a 100-mile on the same course. So I generally like to get people closer to 10 to 11 hours a week for their peak 3 weeks of training, going into a 100-mile race before the taper itself, at least, right? Again, these are minimum principles. So that's the minimum amount. Now, 10 to 11 is usually more of the minimum I like to get people closer at, because where I generally see most people peak out who I coach in a 100-mile race, and again, it's going to depend on so many different factors, but most people I would see for their peak week in terms of hours is going to be anywhere between 12 to 15, 16, even 17 hours a week for most people. For Javelina, for me, I mean, I peaked at like 20 hours, but again, like I was really hammering the volume. And also too, I have a lot of flexibility with my schedule, just being a full-time coach and full-time podcaster and things like that too. But I generally see people will peak anywhere between 12 to 17 hours a week in terms of their training for a 100-mile race in their peak week itself. And again, you want to build up to that gradually. Don't just take that as an arbitrary number. And if you can only build to 13 hours a week and you can't get to that 17, it's totally okay. Like, you want to build to what you can do safely, what you can manage into your schedule. And here's the other big caveat. I talk about this on the podcast a lot, is you don't want to have like volume creep into the point where you're consistently getting less sleep and you're also consistently bleeding into other priorities in your life that are causing extra stress. So that first point is pretty simple, right? Like, obviously, if you're getting less sleep over time to fit in the volume, then that's a red flag. Reason for that is because sleep is the most important thing when it comes to recovery. And so if you're stacking mileage at the sake of sleep, you're increasing stress on the body and taking away recovery time, which is a one-way ticket to the PT's office, and we don't want that. But the second thing, the priorities thing, I think is very important, because if it's going to be more stressful for you to like get in your training and you're spending away time from your kids, or maybe like your job is becoming a little bit like less attended to or anything to such like that, I always say like training is not worth getting a divorce over or losing your job over. And listen, if that's how you ride, like, totally okay. I'm not saying, like, listen, I'm not here to say what's right or wrong, but my whole point is that, like, if it starts to bleed into the stressfulness of your life, like, that's not worth it either, because even just from a physiological standpoint, increased cortisol is actually going to lead to less recovery. And so you always want to be balancing that game of rest and stress being the training, rest being obviously rest and recovery. So that's always like the peak thing to determine, like, if someone can ramp into that volume safely, like, that's the next question I ask athletes, and whatever that number is, that's the peak. Now, if you have to peak early and you have more weeks on the training, the best way to structure your weeks to still get an adaptation is make your long runs longer and your shorter runs shorter, because now you're condensing the volume. Remember our conversation on long runs right before? If you have an 8-hour long run, it's going to be more impactful on the body than 2 4-hour runs. So making your long runs longer, shorter runs shorter is going to do that same stimulus effect on that same hours per week, right? So anyways, that's one of the peak weeks. And generally with the peak weeks, like, most of your volume is going to come from your long runs anyways. A lot of it is going to tend to be more easy volume. You might throw in one or two relatively higher intensity workouts in a week. And usually they're going to be anywhere between steady state volume, which is going to be, just for terms here, like easy runs is kind of like where you're normally going to have like your paces as well too. And then your like your long run pace, that is, right? And I go on the scale of rate of perceived exertion. So meaning like whenever I'm programming an athlete or even just my own training, I say, hey, you're going to do this on an effort level of 1 to 10. And so for long runs and most easy runs, it's going to be 2 to 3. Steady state is going to be 4 to 5, and that's what I call aerobic threshold. So it's going to be right under the point where you dip into that anaerobic zone, which can kick you out of like that fat burning low intensity thing that you can hold for longer. And so you might do one day a week of that steady state work, or even some tempo intensity work, which would be a 6 to 7 RPE in terms of the rate of perceived exertion scale. And that tempo can help to keep your top end fitness a little bit sharp. And again, that's going to depend on what you need and everything as such too. But you might do 1 to 2 relatively higher intensity sessions, and most of your volume is probably going to come from either 1 or 2 long runs that you have in the week with some easy runs sprinkled in between. And so that's on that in terms of like how that structure looks like if you zoom into it a little bit more. Now, I'll talk about mileage as well too, because I talked about time on feet for what a peak week would look like. From a mileage perspective, I generally like to say from a minimum perspective, I would say like 50 miles per week would be like the minimum thing to have in the 6 weeks before the taper. I would say that as an absolute minimum. But if I'm looking at in terms of like, being very well prepared for a race, I like to tend to see people around 70 miles a week. Now, again, that's going to completely depend on a lot of different things. Like generally, if you're running a more verti race, you're probably going to do less miles just because to get to 70 miles with a lot of vert, that's going to take a lot more time than, doing 70 miles on flatter ground. So I will say that there is a little bit of a base on that. And again, that's why I like to do time on feet as opposed to mileage. But if you want something at a mileage number, I think 70 miles a week for your peak, like 3 weeks before the taper, is a generally good space to be to. And even if you can carry that out to the 6 weeks, I mean, it's great as well too. And again, that same principle applies if you're going by mileage. Again, condensing your mileage in a week is going to give you that same effect of progressing without actually adding on some extra time. So hopes that helps in terms of the structure for peak mileage for a 100-mile race training. Okay, next question on the 100-mile stuff. Suggestions for a good 100-miler that has gorgeous views, climbs, etc. So yes, I think it's a great way to look at it. I think when people just in general ask me, like, what's a good first 100 miler to do? I always like to ask, what's the experience that you want? And if someone's like, well, I don't know what experience that I want, I usually like to look at courses that are, not a walk in the park, and not saying that 100 miles is a walk in the park or easy by any means. Like if you're doing 100 mile or any course, 100 miles is 100 miles. It's friggin' hard. But I like to look at one that's like a balance between like giving you like a challenge out there, but it's one that's like not so super exorbitant to the point where it's like, it is a huge stretch to do as your first one, right? So when I think about these races, and this one specifically is one that says gorgeous views, some climbs, everything as such too. From this specific lens, if looking for a 100 miler, that's a good first one that has some climbs, gorgeous views, everything as such too. There's 3 races that come to mind for me. Number 1 is Zion 100 miler. So Zion 100, I got the belt buckle right behind me here, right over here. If you're watching on YouTube, that is. And yes, by the way, we have a YouTube channel. Anyways, all that being said, Zion 100 miler was actually my first 100 miler, and I think it's one of the most perfect first 100 mile races. And the reason for that is because I don't think it's incredibly difficult relative to other 100 mile races, but it still has some challenging elements enough to the point where you're going to, get challenge out there that's going to allow you to, get that experience of like pushing through some low stuff. And so the other thing I really like about Zion is that it has a lot of diversity, and you can get hit with basically almost any struggle that you're going to get in an ultra marathon in 100 miles. So Zion, like, it's pretty chilly in the early mornings and at the nighttime, but it can be hot as hell during the daytime. There's a lot of flat runnable sections, and there's a lot of pretty steep climbs out there as well too. There's a lot of, flat runnable stuff, and there's a lot of technical slick rock and things like that too. So, and let me tell you, the views are gorgeous. I mean, you're just outside Zion National Park. I mean, you can't beat that at all. So I think because of that, like, Zion is a really good course. Also, for 100 miles, it only has about 10,000 feet of climbing. So like, that's really not so much. Like, I consider a very hilly 100 miler to be anything with over 18,000 feet of climbing. And so if you take that into account, 10,000 is not that much. But like, the climbs are pretty steep during the race. Like, there's 2 pretty steep climbs out there. There's one at mile 70 that's absolutely gnarly. And so, with that said, you kind of get a lot of good aspects of ultra running in a first 100 miler that's not too crazy, super, super beautiful, and has good attainable stuff. So, Zion 100 miler is a very good 100 miler to do because you kind of get a little bit of everything, and it's like a good one to go for your first one. That's the one that I did my first one, and I thought it was a perfect first 100 miler. Another one that I really like for a first 100 miler is Rim to River 100 miler. Very similar profile to Zion, where it has 10,000 feet of climbing over 100 miles. Gorgeous views. I mean, you're out in West Virginia. It's beautiful country out there. It's amazing. The terrain has some technical terrain, has some runnable terrain, so you got a little bit of everything. Again, it can be hot there, it can be cold. The weather kind of like varies all that time of year as well too, but kind of like Zion, it's got a little bit of mix of everything, and it's an East Coast race too. So if you're closer to that East Coast, you get in there too. It is a lottery now because the race is very, very popular. So if that is one that you consider to do, make sure that you enter a lottery for that, and you have a backup plan in case you don't get in the lottery. So that's one too. And then another one that I really like on the West Coast is Oregon Cascades 100 miler. I've coached several athletes for this race. And again, very similar to Zion, where it's like it's got climbs, but it's not too steep. Got a good amount of elevation gain throughout as well, too. Beautiful views. And I think it's a very attainable 100-mile race to do. So that's a really, really good one that I also suggest as well. So those would be three options that I would give: Zion 100, Oregon Cascades, Rim to River 100. If you're like, I'm just looking for an 100-mile race to do that's like the most attainable that I could probably do out there. The other one that I also mentioned too, that I would also say fits into the same category that you mentioned, I can't even believe it because it's coming up in a few weeks, is Sedona Canyon's 125. Now you might be like, well, Joe, I asked for a 100 miler. Why are you saying 125? Well, yes, I mean, 25 miles additional to 100 definitely is significant. But the reason why Sedona Canyons is so nice is because it has an incredibly generous cutoff. You're going on Cocodona cutoffs, which, if you're unfamiliar, Cocodona is the 250-mile race, and Sedona Canyons is the back 125, essentially, of that course. But what's super cool is you run that at the same time that Cocodona, the 250, is going on, and you're actually going by Cocodona cutoffs. And so you have like, I think, over 70 hours to finish this 125-mile race. And so for someone who might be, maybe worried about cutoffs or anything as such too, that's why I think Sedona Canyons is such a great race to do. And also you get a mix of everything. You have flat running sections, you have hot sections, you have cold sections, you get elevation because you go to Flagstaff, you get some climbing through Sedona. It's got 14,000 feet of climbing throughout, which over 125 isn't bad. And so you have water crossings, and it's an amazing vibe and an amazing event. I've done Cocodona. My wife's actually doing Sedona Canyons, which is super exciting. I'll be out there crewing and pacing. So if you're out there, please say hello. We have like, I think 10 athletes doing the race this year too. So yeah, that's a really, really good one I would pick as well. But anyways, if you're looking for other 100-mile races that like, you're like, hey, I just want one that's like attainable and like not like so far out of reach. Some ones that I really like to suggest are Hennepin 100. So it is pretty much a dead flat 100-mile race on like a crushed gravel path. So Hennepin 100, that's in October. Another one is Javelina 100, which the course isn't that difficult, but the heat definitely makes it difficult, and kind of similar to the other course I mentioned. Javelina is one where it's like the course is difficult, but the heat kind of like puts a big X factor on that, which kind of gives you a little bit more where it's like, oh, this race isn't like a guaranteer in the bag. So I do like Javelina for a first 100 miler. It's really good too. And then another one I like is Tunnel Hill. Tunnel Hill 100 miler. It's dead flat, perfect weather conditions usually, and that's a really, really good one as well too. So those are like relatively some flatter options as well too. So those are some good options for 100 milers for a first one if you're looking to do a first one, or if you're looking to like get a PR and rip it out there for sure. So that would So that's my suggestion for first 100 milers. Okay, next question here. I included this one into 100 milers because I think even though it wasn't specifically on a 100-mile question, I think it's a good one to ask. So this one is, would you do a run walk strategy on a flat course or flat ground in a race? So here's my take on like the run walk strategy thing. I think put it this way, with run walking, I think one of the biggest benefits, and there's a lot of good benefits and a lot of people I know who do the run walk strategy and are very successful with it. Jeff Galloway is someone who notably like mentioned or basically has like popularized the run walk method. And it's the very, very famous 7 minutes run, 3 minutes walk methodology. And the whole methodology on that is that you're able to go for longer periods of time more efficiently with a run walk method. I think there's a lot of merit to it because, running is inherently much more impactful on your body than walking, because with walking, you're not really reverberating too much of your body weight back at you. When you're running, 2 times your body weight generally comes back at you. So if you think about just breaking that up a little bit more, like the theory on that is that, you do a little less wear and tear on your body and you can run a little bit more. But here is kind of like my opinion on that. I think that, just in experience with working with athletes and who have done the run walk method before and everything as such too. Like for example, I worked with one athlete who was doing the run walk method before, and he actually came to me and he's like, should I be doing this? And I went through this exact same conversation with him in that if you can run at a low intensity for longer periods of time and really maintain that without your body feeling too beat up, or like you're going to feel beat up in these ultras when you run them for sure. But if you can run as much of it as possible, like you're going to probably increase your chances of getting a better time and a better result, and also just be able to move a little bit more efficiently throughout the time. Now, I will say this, if you are someone who is like very durability limited and you have done a lot of high volume training, or maybe you have some injury histories or anything of such too, it could be a good consideration to do, just because like with run walk, like where I would say it's a good consideration is like if you need to like get time on feet up a lot quicker. Because think about it like this, like if you're trying to get your time on feet up a lot quicker, if you're run walking, you're able to take on more time on feet than if you're supposed to do more volume or the same volume increase all with running, because it's the impact that really just bothers it a ton. So I think that's like a decent use case to do so. But in my opinion, like if you can go out and run those extra miles, or even just in a race at a low intensity and just running for that period of time and feel pretty good throughout, relatively good, then I would just say like I honestly am a big just fan of just running it. If you look at most people who run really well 100-mile races or just long ultras in general, even if they're flat, they're generally running for most of it out there. And not to say that the goal for you should be to run most of it, and like you can walk it, but I think like sometimes having a structured run walk method can almost undersell you a little bit, because if you can like, yeah, you might run walk later, and I think that isn't a bad strategy. Like if you were deploying a run walk strategy later into a race once your legs are beat up, I don't think that's a bad move at all. But I do think that you could be potentially like underselling your ability by run walking too early in the beginning when you're a little bit fresh. And not saying you should bank miles in the beginning, but like also at the same point, like you're going to be out there for a long time on feet anyways. And I do think that even if you're doing a run walk methodology, like there is going to be some level of soreness. And so, but if you can maintain a low intensity and you build up your durability in training to be able to run for longer periods of time, I think I would rather opt for you being able to run at a lower intensity, albeit maybe a little slower than what you would do at a run walk pace, because you're probably going to move a little bit more efficiently down the line. And if later on your legs get wrecked and you want to do a run walk strategy, I would suggest that too. So, for me, I'm not the biggest fan of always defaulting to run walk, but I think if you're a person who maybe needs to get a little bit more time on feet lately, or maybe have like a injury history with high volume, or like maybe even just for you, like even if you're doing high volume and you do feel like your durability limited, I can see those use cases being well. But for me, I'm more from the standpoint of like, if you can run comfortably, and I shouldn't say comfortably because we do get uncomfortable, but if you can run sustainably for longer periods of time and not pay the price for it super quick, I think running as much as you can is usually a good bet. Now, granted, like if this was in regards to a flat course, like if you're on a hilly course, then usually my general recommendation is like run as much as you can on the uphills and the downs if you can, and then walk the flats, walk the uphills. Sorry, did I say that correctly? I meant to say run as much of the downhills and the flats as you can and walk the uphills. Like that's a good kind of rule to have. And that one I like if I'm going to have a run walk rule, that's generally the one that I like to do for a lot of people because it keeps the intensity down. But again, if you can keep the intensity low for 2 to 3 RP and you can run out there, great. Oh, and another use case, I guess I would say for run walk, if you wanted to, is like, and again, this is for people who like maybe just get started running. Sometimes it can be hard to just run and even get to that 2 to 3 RPE when you're just starting to run. And that's where run walk can be helpful. Run walking can also be helpful if you're coming off of injury or you're coming off a long time period with running and you want to build up that volume again without paying the price of the running. So that's something that I would suggest on there too. So that's kind of my thought process on run walking on there too. All right, let's move to the next topic here, which is strength training. So this is something that I've been gung-ho on lately. I have been someone who had been doing 1 day a week of strength training, like going into 100-mile races. And even when I went into Arizona Monster 300, I was doing one day a week of strength. But now, doing more research and kind of going into things, I am really, really a big proponent of strength training. And so when I go into Tahoe 200, I'm going to be pretty much doing, and this is actually one of the questions. So one of the questions that I got, I'll just like jump right to that one because I'm going right into it, is where's the question? I'm looking on the list here because I'm out of order because I'm jumping ahead. I'm getting a little too excited here. Oh, okay. So here's the question. What lifting and mobility work are you going to be doing moving forward? So right now it is April 24th as I'm recording this, and Tahoe 200, which is my next race, is June 13th. Now, if you all know and have listened to the podcast, you know that at mile 200 at Arizona Monster, I ended up getting a very, very swelled up knee, and a lot of that related to having a muscular imbalance in my hips that just compounded over 200 miles and basically caused my knee to just get completely overworked and swollen up, and I got an extreme case of just patellofemoral syndrome, which is runner's knee, and it was just so swollen I couldn't even walk on it. It was just horrible. And to not risk long-term injury, I ended up dropping from the race because I didn't want to do long-term surgery. Or sorry, I mean, it could have led to surgery, could have led to injury. Anyways, I didn't want to do it. But what it kind of came from, and what the big learning lesson for me was, I needed to do more strength training to be on top of that. So for me, what my protocol is going to be is I'm going to be doing about 2 to 3 times a week of relatively heavier lifts, probably closer to the 2 times a week of relatively heavier lifting. So this is going to be reps where I'm doing 4 to 6 reps essentially of relatively heavier weight. And then I'm going to be doing 2 days of more banded and accessory work. So this is going to be things like more like single leg stuff or things you would do typically in a physical therapist's office. So I'll do 2 times a week of that. And then pretty much for 5 days a week, I will be doing mobility, if not 6 or 7 days a week of mobility. Just because mobility is not something that's going to penalize you if you do it. It's just going to make your muscles a little bit more limber and loose. And so I'm going to do at least 5 days a week of mobility. So that's going to be my general strength protocol from now until Tahoe 200. I'm doing tons of research, tapping into a lot of different strength experts and everything as such too. But that's going to be my general protocol going into Tahoe 200. And my plan is, because for me, like where I'm at in my running career right now, like I really want to focus on 2 different things right now. I want to focus on fast 100 milers, and I want to focus on long 200 plus mile races. And I think I think the fast 100 milers, like strength is definitely important for sure, but I don't think it's as much of an emphasis of what's needed for running 200 milers. I think if you look at any really good 200 plus mile athlete, whether it's Jeff Browning, Mike McKnight, Courtney DeWalter, even Tara Dower, right, who just absolutely just freaking crushed the Appalachian Trail. They're doing strength training pretty targeted as well. Even I look at my friend Sarah Suzuki, who is the Coconut current course record holder as of this recording. She's posting a tons of reels of her, or videos of her, I shouldn't say reels, but Instagram stories of her in the gym working on strength. And I think that's just a very, very good quality to have, because what it was explained to me in terms of this, and I thought it was very insightful, was that, at a certain point in these 200-mile races, like, you're just going to feel super fatigued, but to the degree of how well you can keep your muscles strong and stable and durable out there is going to lead to how well you do in these races, because these races aren't about who's the fastest. It's about who's the most durable. And there's only so much mileage that you can really put up in a given week in terms of running. And I think for a lot of other stuff, like durability is definitely more of a function of just running more. And quite frankly, I think most people are durability limited, not because they're not lifting weights, but I think it's just because they can run more. But again, if you're going to run more and you're going to run for long periods of time as efficiently as possible, like having strong muscles is going to be a good foundation onto that too. So anyways, for me in my career right now, like I'm going to be taking strength training super, super seriously. And that's going to be the biggest thing too. The other thing too is, like, once you actually get past age 30, and right now I'm 30 years old, I turned 30 several months ago. That's where muscle start to decay a little bit more. So even for me, just hitting 30 now, it's like, now I'm on the clock. Like I gotta be going through, and I gotta be in a position where I'm strength training and getting this lifting in and everything as such too. So that way too, I'm going to be able to do it. And that's why I look at guys like Jeff Browning, who's 51 years old, and he's out there getting second place at Cocodona and winning 100-mile races at 51. And I think a lot of that has to do with his strength training. So I think it's a really, really good thing, really, really good thing to think about, in your own career and everything as such too. So really, really big on strength. And that's my routine, what it's going to be going forward as well too. Okay. Next question. What are your top strength exercises an ultra runner should prioritize? I think there's like a core, like 4 or 5 workouts that I usually would suggest someone to do if they're going to do anything at all. And by the way, it doesn't have to be I just laid out my strength routine. I'm definitely going extra on it for sure. I shouldn't say extra, but like I don't think everybody needs to do that strength training that I laid out. In fact, like what I'm doing is definitely like I don't want to say optimal. Optimal is not the right word, but I think there's like the satisfactory amount, and then there's like, oh, if you want to go above and beyond. And again, for me, like I said before, I have a little bit more flexibility with my schedule. Like my full time thing is coaching, running, podcasting, so I have more flexibility in my schedule, and I know not everybody does. And also, too, in full transparency, I don't have kids right now. It's just me and my wife, and we're both like pretty focused on like our careers right now, and so like there's that, right? But so if you are only looking, like if you want to do strength, you don't have to do the routine. Like what I would suggest is maybe doing 2 times a week, 1 to 2 times a week of these simple exercises that you can do. So number one, I think everybody, if you're doing strength and you're a runner, single leg step ups for sure. Single leg step ups. I think they're such a great exercise. They target the right muscles. They're very specific to running, especially if you're an uphill, doing an uphill race too. So single leg weighted step ups, really, really good to do. So I think that's a must in there. 2, single leg RDLs or Romanian deadlifts. So basically single leg deadlifts. Again, another great exercise that targets the right muscles, hamstrings, glutes, all those things as well that are going to be super, super important. Hips for those posterior chain when you're going out there and doing those runnings. And I like the single leg factor because someone explained to me this once. They said, when you're running, when are you ever on 2 legs? And I was like, that's a damn good point. If you're on 2 legs when you're running, it's probably going to look super weird. So doing the single leg work helps with that as well. And it helps to correct muscular imbalances as well if you have them. So single leg Romanian deadlifts, that's another good one. The other one that I also like to say is if possible, if you can do single leg squats, it's a really good one to do. But I know not everyone might not be able to do single leg squats. So if you can't, doing things like barbell back squats or body weight squats or goblet squats, some sort of a squat is a really good thing to incorporate in your training. So that one as well. Calf raises. So calf raises, really, really important because you want to work those calves. And if you have any history of Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis, those kind of things as well, it usually can be related to that calf muscle. And so calf raises, I think, are an absolute must to include in there as well. So that's another great exercise that I would 100% include too. Bulgarian split squats, if you can handle them. And that can be your form of squat if you don't want to put in some other squats, but Bulgarian split squats are a very, very good exercise to do. And then the other one is my personal favorite, the one that I really love to do is banded sidewalks. So basically it's like one where you put the band around your ankles or higher up if you need to, and you're kind of like doing like a lateral step side to side as well. That's a really, really good one to activate your glute muscles and to activate your hips in there and strengthen those as well too. So that's like the core kind of tenets of exercises that I like to have. And if you just do those, progress those, and do those 2 times a week, 1 to 2 times a week, you should be in a good spot. But those are usually my favorite ones to do for ultra runners out there that target the right muscles, are very running specific, and can also really, really help you progress too. And again, you can switch it up too. Like if you can do, like instead of single leg RDLs, you can do double leg deadlifts if you want to, like regular deadlifts. And you can switch it up along the way too. But anyways, those are some variations in there too. I think one of the biggest thing to think about with strength is just like running, you want to progress it. So like if a certain rep and weight range is too easy, then you either want to increase the reps or increase the weights. And so, and that's a whole thing you can go through with like strength periodization and everything. But I think one of the biggest things, just like in training, you want to progress and you don't want to be in a position where, you are doing this. Now, at a certain point, you can maintain. And honestly, like I think even when you're getting into super high volume and stuff, having a maintenance session on strength might be good because, you don't want to like overload yourself with just like all this weight that you're progressing on while also putting on high volume. You kind of got to make a little bit of a trade-off in those periods. But that's just something to think about when it comes to strength training. So there's that. Okay. So hope that helps on there. All right. So okay. Next question on here. How to loosen up the hips and legs after a strength workout. Great question. So I know for me, like usually like I like to do my mobility after. So I usually like to do a little bit of a warm up routine in the beginning before my strength sessions just to get the blood moving and everything too. And this is something that was actually like written, like my wife actually wrote this warm up routine for me. It's very, very good. If you want the warm up routine, send me an email at everydayultrapodcast@gmail.com. I'm happy to send the routine to you. It's a little long. There's a lot of steps in there, but basically some of the things that it includes those lateral sidewalks on a lower thing too that I was kind of mentioning before. It includes monster walks. It includes world's greatest stretch, if you've ever heard of that before. It includes hip hinges. There's a lot of different things in there too. But if you want it, email me. I'm happy to give it over to you. My wife's an awesome strength trainer. So yeah, she's great. But anywho, all that being said, I like to warm up before, do my strength routine, and then do my mobility afterwards, because that mobility helps to like keep the blood just kind of flowing a little bit more. So if I do feel like I'm a little bit tight, or if I feel like I'm a little bit just overall in a position where like the legs are just feeling a little bit like jelly, that helps to move it around a little bit. Some other thing that I like to do, and this is not even just after strength workouts, it can be after hill workouts or anything as such. Like for example, I did a hill workout yesterday, and later in the day because like I usually sit, unfortunately, I sit a lot during my day because I'm usually on calls, programming athletes, working on the podcast, things like that too. But I will go up and just like walk around and just flush the legs out. That can just help a ton. Like that can really, really help a ton. Hydration though is huge. Like making sure you're staying hydrated is a really, really good way. What a lot of people don't understand is a lot of your muscles are actually water. And so if you are dehydrated and you do a hard strength session or even just a hard like workout session with running, and you're not hydrated enough, you can definitely get some soreness, tightness, all that kind of stuff too. So I always like to make sure I'm hydrated as well too, which can help as well too. So that's how I like to loosen up the hips and legs after a strength workout as well too. Okay, cool. Bonus question here. That was the strengths questions. There's a bonus question. I put it on here and I was like, it's a good question, but I don't know which one of these categories I'll fall on, because the next ones we're going to talk about shoes. But anyways, let's talk about it. So someone asked this question. They said, what helps the most with getting faster on trails? And this is an excellent question. And I think it really breaks down into two different things and really comes down, I guess, with the two different things to ask you one question if you're thinking about increasing speed on the trails. Now, here's the question you want to ask yourself is, what is my biggest limiter out here? And by the way, when it comes to speed on the trails, like this question just doesn't apply to that. This question applies to anything you might be stuck at in your training. So the question is, what is limiting me the most? So like, for example, if you are trying to go for a 100-mile PR and you keep falling short, like ask yourself the question, like, what is limiting me? Like, is it your durability? Like, are your muscles dying out quicker? Is it your speed? Is it your nutrition strategy? Is it your climbing strength? Is it your descending? Like, what is limiting me? So like, I think that's the question that you always have to ask yourself in terms of like getting faster on the trails, because for you, it might just be uphill efficiency. It might be downhill efficiency. It might be overall fitness. It might be technical skills on the trail. So I think to get faster on the trails overall, you have to ask yourself the question, what is limiting me? And once you actually find the right limiter and you target that limiter and you work on that limiter and you increase your overall stimulus to improve said limiter, then you get better at that thing. And so I think the first thing, like when people always say like, how do I get faster on the trails? Like, it's not a one size fits all answer, because you always got to look at what is the biggest limiter. Now, to give you some tactical answers, because I don't want to just leave that open ended, is I'll tell you what the most common things that I see for people who generally aren't as fast on the trails. I think one of the most things just in general, and I think this is always the biggest bang for the buck, is going to be general fitness. And I always say too, like when it comes to improving your overall speed or just like performance in these ultra marathons in general, fitness is always going to be king. And I define fitness in two different things. Like what makes up fitness is number one is going to be your durability. And I focus on a lot of the podcast, and durability, just to define that, is how strong your muscles can be to hold up for long periods of time before breaking down. So that's the durability aspect. And the second thing is your aerobic engine. So how efficient is your aerobic engine? Meaning, like, can you sustain a lower intensity for longer periods of time at a faster pace, right? So there's two kind of levers on there too. So to get faster on the trails, like again, if we're asking, if it is a fitness, let's just say fitness is your limiter. You're like, oh, I think fitness is my limiter. Okay, well, which of those 1, 2 is your limiters? Is it your aerobic engine, or is it your durability? Now, if it's your durability, like that usually means it's not necessarily a sheer speed thing. Like, because here's the thing too. Here's the message I always like to explain is that like maybe getting overall faster on the trail doesn't necessarily mean holding a pace or running a specific pace at any one time, but it's like increasing your pace overall on the run. And you might fade a little bit more towards the end of that run because your muscles are dying down. But if you can keep the same speed and not fade as much and hold that same pace for a longer period of time, then you're going to be quote unquote faster for that run, right? Like I think about even like Javelina 100 for me last year, where I ran my 100-mile PR. It was 15 hours and 28 minutes. I had been doing a lot of long distance running going into that race because I did Cocodona 250 and I did Uray 100. And so I did lose a lot of top end speed because I was mostly focused on just like a lot of hiking and all that kind of stuff for those kind of races. And even when I asked myself, I was like, okay, well, I want to get this 100-mile PR. Like, what's my biggest limiter? And it was durability. And usually the biggest answer for durability is going to be volume, just running volume, like running more volume and running it up safely. So, like, for me, like, I actually really wasn't faster than what I was when I did Javelina in 2020, what year? 2023 versus 2024. 2023, I was like super fast because I was like really focusing on just like fast races that year. And then I really focused on like more longer and slower races. So therefore, like my training just inhibited me to just do a little bit more of that. And so like even though like my pace was slower, and again that was by choice and through training, intentional training structure, I ran nearly an hour and it was hour and 20-minute PR. And it was also way hotter temperatures, by the way. When I ran in 2023, it was 84 degrees. When I ran it last year, it was 98 degrees, the hottest javelina on record. And I PR'd it by that much, even with being a little bit more overall slower because I had better durability and I didn't fade as much. I actually negative split that 100-mile race, which was nuts. So my point isn't here to brag. My point is to say, like, I became faster that year, but I became more durable. And really a function of that is just like more volume. Like you generally just have to do more volume, or you need to do longer runs, condense. Like that's what the function of durability is. Now, if it's an aerobic engine thing, and if you're unsure, right, the aerobic engine is basically like if your breathing dies out, like even if you're at a low intensity, and let's just say your breathing craps out at like 6, 7, 8, 9, then you're going to need to do some more fitness specific work that's going to be more around higher intensity intervals. So that can be anywhere between steady state intervals, which is aerobic threshold. It could be lactate threshold intervals, which is going to be 6 to 7 rate of perceived exertion or tempo runs, and then VO2 max targeted intervals. To really break this down real quick, VO2 max is how efficiently your body can process oxygen. So intuitively, right, if your body can process oxygen more, you're going to breathe more efficiently after. And basically, that's done by doing very short, high intensity intervals to target that specific area. Now, your lactate threshold, that is the point in which your body has to slow itself down when it builds lactate up in the body from doing work. And the higher your lactate threshold, the more lactate you're able to handle without needing to slow down, meaning you can carry faster paces for longer periods of time. So if you have a higher lactate threshold and your VO2 max is higher, your aerobic engine is going to be much more efficient and you can sustain faster paces for longer periods of time without your body slowing down, either due to lactate or due to oxygen efficiency, right? So I'll give you an example, even for me. So Arizona Monster, I ran the first 200 miles. I ran it amazing. I ran it great. My durability was awesome. The knee thing obviously was more of like a strength thing and everything such too. But the big thing that I was like, oh, like I felt my breathing just to kind of die down a little bit earlier. And I was like, oh, I really need to focus on this aerobic engine. So like for me going into Tahoe, even like it's funny because I'm going from 300 miles to 200 miles because less distance, but I'm going to be doing a lot more speed. Pending my knee holds up well, I'm going to be doing a lot more speed work going into that as well too. And I think the biggest misnomer about speed work is that speed work is all about like getting faster, but it's not. It's really just about increasing your overall fitness at the lower intensity. So it's not necessarily like you're trying to go faster. Like, I mean, yes, you are like, but I mean, just like not like faster at a higher intensity. Like doing speed work helps you get faster even at a low intensity. So that's the big thing to do. So if you are aerobic engine limited, that's the thing too. So that's one of the most common things. Now, the second most common thing, and again, I won't go through every variable, but I think the second most common variable that I see people limit on trails is just technical skills and being able to have good footing out there on the trails. And the biggest thing that I always say is getting better on the trails and getting faster on the trails, if it is like more of like a technical skill limitation on there, is just going to be exposure therapy. And the more you get out there, the more comfortable you're going to be. Now, I think here's the thing, right? Because you might be going at like a very slow RPE where you're not actually going into that like 2 to 3 RPE, which I consider like the magic zone when you're going for like very long runs and just like aerobic stuff. You might be going a little bit less because you're being a little bit more cautious with where your feet are and where your awareness is and everything as such too. So if that's the case, then I always say push your comfort level just a little bit in each run. Not a lot, to the point where you're like scared shitless and gonna like fall and break your face open. Like, you don't want to do that. No. We don't want any faces broken open. We don't want that. But what you do want to do is push the comfort just a little bit. So, like, for example, there's a trail by me. It's called Trail 100. I live here in Phoenix, and there's fucking rocks everywhere on this thing. I mean, it's literally like someone took a bulldozer or rocks and they're like, yeah, right here, fucking dump it. And literally, it's just like big rocks everywhere. And I remember the first time I went out there, I was like, what the heck is this? And it was just gnarly and nuts. Now it's one of my favorite places to run. And I actually run out there like a lot of times because with that, I push myself slightly more and more to kind of like push the intensity just slightly more and more each time. So because of that, I was able to get to a place where I can now run very close to my normal easy paces on the road on that trail as well, because now I just feel a little bit more comfortable with that skills as well too. Another thing you can do, this is more like tactical, is like you can do things like ankle strengthening exercises, because sometimes it's the ankles that kind of just like move around a little bit more, or what you're kind of cautious of. And I also suggest getting really good at sighting. So with sighting, right, one of the things that can limit people on technical trails is like if you're like looking straight down, like you're actually not going to move as fast. And I know you want to look straight down because you don't want to clip a rock and again break your face open. So, but here's the thing, you got to get better at lifting your eyes up. Why? Because if you lift your eyes up, you can actually see ahead, pick your line, and your feet are going to move a little bit more efficiently, as opposed to being reactive to every first thing that goes into your field of vision, right? So that's what you have to do. And again, pick up your head slowly, like inch it. Do one session where you're a little uncomfortable, then break through that and do that until that's comfortable. Then the next session, pick your head up a little bit more so you can be a little bit more comfortable, and then just kind of do that until like now you're facing square ahead. And if you're like, Joe, that sounds nuts, like what the heck? But your brain is an interesting phenomenon where like basically like if it sees the path ahead, like it's going to register in your brain, your feet are actually going to move like accordingly to that. It's a really, I know it's like scary to trust that, but give it a try. Trust me, it works. And it's helped me a ton. I always tell myself, pick my head up, pick my head up, pick my head up. And that just allows me to just really just move as fast as I can on the trails out there too. All right, let's talk about shoes real quick in these last 10 minutes on this podcast. So number one, thoughts on carbon plated trail shoes, and are they as legit as road super shoes? So I don't think they're as legit as road super shoes. And I think most of the reason with that was with road super shoes. And by the way, just to define super shoes, for those who are unaware, super shoes are basically carbon plated trail shoes, or sorry, carbon, just doesn't have to be trail shoes, just carbon plated shoes in general. So they're shoes that have a carbon plate, carbon fiber plate that is, in the like the sole of the foot. And basically the whole thing on carbon plated shoes is that when there's a carbon plate in there, it reduces impact forces. It allows you to bounce back, like the foot propulsion is a lot more efficient, so you kind of bounce off a lot quicker. The energy return is a lot more efficient, to the point where like it basically works a little bit for you so that your muscles aren't like using as much energy out there. So there's that as well too. So there's a lot of documented evidence of carbon plated shoes just exponentially increasing performance. Like if you look at almost any marathoner who's running fast marathoners, they're probably wearing carbon plated shoes. I mean, I shouldn't say probably, like probably 99% guaranteed that they're probably wearing carbon shoes. And so, and that's because it leads to really, really good things. And on the road, there's tons of studies, tons of documented evidence, everything that says carbon plated shoes are going to dramatically increase your performance, even at a same level of fitness, because of how efficient they are with the energy return, propulsion, all those things as well too. Now, years ago, they started to come out with carbon plated trail shoes. So they put a carbon plate in a trail shoe to bring the same technology to the trails. Now, I do think there's a lot of great benefits out there. And I listen, I wear carbon plated trail shoes when I'm doing fast 100 milers. Like I wore a carbon plated trail shoe the first 2 years at Javelina. I wore one at Canyons 100K. I wore one this year at Black Canyon 100K. I think carbon plated trail shoes are amazing. I think they're great. But I don't think they have as much of the bang for the buck in terms of road shoes. And the biggest reason for that is because most of the trails that you're going to go on are going to be a little bit more uneven terrain. And although it hasn't been documented as much, just knowing the science and how the propulsion works and everything too, I think you lose a little bit of the benefit because your foot's moving around like not in this like flush downward motion as you would on the road. And because you kind of have a little bit more of that technical nature, like the propulsion benefits aren't going to be as energy returning essentially, or energy saving. And so I think with trails, and again, like there hasn't been much extensive study on it, but just knowing the mechanics and stuff, I don't think they're going to be as bang for a buck out there. Now, can they be useful? 1,000,000%, 100%. But I think the reason why I say this is because they're very fucking expensive. expensive. I mean, they're expensive ass shoes. The Nike Ultrafly, which is Nike's version, I think runs at $285. The Hoka Tecton X, I think that one's even more. Oh God, do I dare to even look that up? Yeah, the Hoka Tecton X3 is $275, so it's a $275 shoe. Yeah, it's expensive. That's really, really expensive. So I would say this, like, if you're someone who's willing to invest the price, like, can it make a difference in your performance? For sure, 100%. I think it can, but I don't think you need to feel pressured to do so. And I don't think that you need to have a carbon shoe to be successful out there. Now, I think, listen, carbon shoes, they're for everybody. Everybody can use carbon shoes, whether you're back of the pack, front of the pack, mid pack, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where you're at in the pack. If you want to wear carbon shoes, wear those fucking carbon shoes. Fucking go for it. You got this. But do I think that like everybody needs to have them to have a great performance? Like for a marathon, for a fast marathon, I do suggest most people wear them just because, again, like the benefits you're going to get are amazing. Now, do I think you need to necessarily shell those out for a trail? I don't think you have to. I think it's a nice to have. I don't think it's a must have when it comes to a trail. Do I think it will help with your performance? For sure. Do I think it's like a really, really exponential amount to where paying that is always going to be worth the return? Arguable. So that being said, that's my kind of stance on that too. If you are looking for a good carbon plated trail shoe, my favorite of all time is a Hoka Tecton X3. That thing is amazing. It is comfortable. It is a beast. It is so good. I also do like the Nike Ultrafly, although it's a little bit heavier than the Hoka Tecton X3. That one's just goated for me. I mean, that one's really, really good too. I've never personally ran in it too, but I know David Roche and a lot of athletes have reported good benefits. The Adidas Agravec, I think it's called the Agravec. Oh God, what's the plated version? Jeez. Yeah, clearly I've never ran this. I think it's called the Agravec Speed Ultra. Yeah, so that's like the carbon plated one, I believe. I think so. Right? Is that the carbon plated one? Is that it? Oh my God, I'm looking it up. Carbon plated? Yeah, I think it is. If it's not, let me know. Yes, it is. Okay, so the geez, I'm sorry. Adidas Terrex Agravec Speed Ultra. That's a fucking mouthful. Holy shit. Anyways, but that one, yeah, is one that's also performed really well. I haven't personally worn it, but that's a really good carbon plated trail shoe as well, from what I've heard from other stuff. So, there's that too. I also think too, the more running that you have in a race is more it's going to benefit your carbon plated trail shoe. So like if you're doing a race, it's going to be a lot of hiking. So like, for example, like URA 100, I did that race. It's 40,000 feet of climbing. Basically you're either going uphill or you're like jogging downhill. For that, I did not wear a carbon plated trail shoe because I'm hiking a lot. Now for a race like Javelina, or I'm doing Kodiak 100 miler this year, where like I plan to go out there and rip it and run, I will for 100% sure wear a carbon plated trail shoe because I want to get those benefits out there. So the more runnable terrain, the more it's going to benefit at you. And that's going to be the biggest thing on there. So hope that helps on that regards. Okay. So next question. What is your shoe rotation like? So my personal shoe rotation, listen, I have a lot of shoes. Ask my wife. She always tells me, she's like, you got a shit ton of shoes. I'm like, damn right I do, because I love my shoes. But all that being said, I usually like to have different shoes for different scenarios. So you don't have to go. So let me tell you this. Before I go into my shoe rotation, I'm going to give you what I usually suggest for a lot of people to have, and then basically give you levels of where I would go from there. So I think at the very, very basic thing, I think everybody should have at least one pair of road shoes, one pair of trail shoes. Like keep it as simple as that. One pair of road shoes, one pair of trail shoes. Now to take it even more, I think having one pair of road shoes that maybe is a little bit faster. And so like, by the way, like having like, doesn't even have to be a carbon plated trail shoe. Like there's actually what are called super trainers, which isn't carbon plate. It's actually like a nylon or plastic plate. Like those are really good for like speed workouts. I'll talk about that in a second because that kind of goes to the next question onto here too. But I think having like a faster road shoe, like a more like recovery, like maybe thicker sole trail shoe, and then a thicker sole road shoe. Sorry, let me reverse. So a more faster road shoe that you can do like workouts in, slower, more like recovery style road shoe and then a trail shoe, I think that's like the next level up from there. Then the next level up there would be, again, having a carbon plated trail shoe, regular trail shoe, and again, plated road shoe and recovery regular non-plated road. Now, then to go even more complex from there on the trail side, I think having one that's like a trail shoe for technical trails, a trail shoe for faster trails, whether it's carbon plated or not, I think those are good ones to have as well. And then to even go on more on that, it's like having trail shoes that are different heel to toe drops, which basically that's like how far your heel is different than your toe. And there's a whole different kind of things on there too, but basically having different shoes of different like cushion sizes and everything like that too, because studies do show that the more diverse that you run in your shoes, the more you're going to be less prone, or the less you're going to be prone to injuries that are foot related because your foot's adapting to different kind of shoe styles, right? So that being said, like that's how high you can take it. Now, my personal shoe rotation, yes, I take it to the max on that too. I'll give you everything that I'm actually wearing right now. So for my easy road recovery stuff that I wear. So like this is like for recovery runs or super easy runs on the road. I wear the Nike Invincible 3. I love that shoe. It's super cushioned, super comfortable, very, very great shoe. So I wear the Nike Invincible 3 for that. For my faster road shoe, I actually have two options. I have one that's a racing option if I'm ever just doing a fast road race, which I haven't done in a long time, but I do have that just in case. And then I have my super trainers. So my super trainers, I wear the Hoka Mach X, not the Mach X2, the Mach X. Let me tell you, the Mach X2, I want to love that shoe, but man, it's got this thing on the back that like shredded my Achilles, and that's also a very big purported downside of that shoe. So I don't like the Mach X2, but I wear the Mach X, and I just like ordered a shit ton of them online before they stopped going on sale. But if you're looking for something similar, like I know Saucony has a shoe that's I think it's like the Endorphin. It's one of the Endorphin lines. I think it might be the Endorphin Speed. One of those. It's one of the Endorphin lines that actually has that where it's a nylon plate. And even if you search nylon plated shoes, there's tons of other ones that can be used for good speed workouts. And I use the Hoka Mach X for all of my road speed workouts. So I have that in there too. So Hoka Mach X I wear for that. I actually even wore the Hoka Mach X for Javelina 100 last year on trail. It's a great shoe. I think you can wear the Mach X even on trail if you want to. I think it's a great shoe. It's one of my favorite shoes of all time. And then for trail, so my like comfy, like all day, run all day kind of shoes. And this is the shoe that I wore mostly at the Arizona Monster 300, Nike Zagama 2. I think that is one of the greatest trail shoes of all time. It's comfy and go all day, but like, I mean, I've ripped some fast runs in those shoes on the trails too. And I think it's the perfect all around shoe. It's got enough cushion. The lifespan on it is great. I think it's not too bulky. Or sorry, I shouldn't say bulky. It can be a little bulky, but it's not too heavy. It's like big, but it's like not heavy. I think it's good on technical trails, good on runnable trails, reliable. I love the shoe. Nike Zagama 2. That's like my go-to for like most of my long runs, like all day kind of stuff. And even if I'm doing like 200-mile races, like that's my jam. For more like technical kind of stuff, I like the Hoka Mafate Speed 4. The reason why I like that is because it doesn't have as high of a stack height, and also the lugs on it are so thick. And so if you have a higher stack height, like more thicker shoe, that is, it can be a little tough on technical terrain because like you kind of like on stilts, or not exactly on stilts, but you know what I mean. You're a little bit more prone to kind of like wiggle around more. Whereas like I think the Mafate Speed 4 is like very controlled and easy to kind of like maneuver around. So, and the lugs on there are amazing. The lugs work great on snow too. That shoe is just an absolute workhorse. So I love that. And then faster trail workout shoes, I wear the Hoka Tecton X. So right now I have the 2. I've ran in the 3s, but I don't currently own a pair because I did have a pair at worn out. And then I had a pair of 2s on ice that I've just kind of like used for like trail workouts and stuff. So, but the Hoka Tecton X2 is what I wear right now. I would wear the 3s if I had a pair. I just haven't had the need to buy a new pair for the 3s in a while. So I just use those if I'm doing like a workout on the trails, or if I'm racing like a fast trail race, like Black Canyon 100K. I wore the Hoka Tecton X2, and I really, really liked it. Now I am experimenting with some other shoes in the mix right now. Right now I'm experimenting with Speedland. So I'm wearing the Speedland GS Oak, which is like, I think it's a 1 or 2 year old version. It's just one I've had the pair. I just haven't worn it ever, but I'm testing it out because, you know what I really like on it is it has the BOA system where basically like you can like click in like how tight like your shoes is and stuff like that. And where I see the problem with these 200-mile races is like your feet can really swell up a lot. And I actually learned this from Jose Sosa, who's on the Speedland team, and I was running with him at the Arizona Monster, and he was like, "Oh, when my feet swell up, I can just like click the BOA." and I don't need an extra pair of shoes. And I was like, holy shit, that's actually fucking genius. So I'm giving it a try. I used to run in Speedland a while back ago, and I wasn't totally sold on it, but I've been doing some runs here and there on it, and I actually do starting to like the shoe and warm up to it a little bit. So I'm running in the Speedlands. TBD if it'll be in the rotation or not. I might use it at Tahoe 200 at the end, but who knows? And then I'm also trying the NN Normal Tormir 2. I got gifted those shoes a while back. Again, haven't used them in a while, but yeah, I've been using those a little bit more. The reason why is I'm trying to experiment with more of a higher heel to toe drop because my knee was having those issues at Arizona Monster 300. And what studies show is that actually a higher heel to toe drop is going to be a little better on your knees. And so for me, like, where I'm kind of thinking of is like, I'm coming off this knee thing from Arizona Monster. I'm going to Tahoe 200. I'm going to run Tahoe 200 hard. I might run in my Nike Zagama 2s, which is a relatively lower drop shoe. It's about 4 or 5 millimeters, which is a relatively lower drop shoe. And I might switch into a higher drop shoe at the end to make sure I'm putting less pressure on the knee later on too. So I'm probably going to go Zagama 2 for probably like the first 140 miles. And then maybe the last 60, I'll either go Speedland or Tormir if I like them. If I don't, I might opt for another Nike shoe. So I might opt for like the Kiger or the Pegasus. But the only thing that makes me a little iffy on that is like the cushioning on those isn't as much. But all that being said, that's how I'm thinking about my current shoe rotation and what's in there too. Okay, and then the last question on here is favorite speedwork shoe that you like that can be used to up to 15-ish miles on trail. So I actually do like to wear the Hoka Mach X on trail. It is a road shoe, but I do really, really like to use it. And because I found that like it works well on trail. I think you can wear road shoes on trail. You just got to be comfortable with it. And for me, I've done it enough times where I'm very comfortable with wearing a road shoe on a trail. So that being said, I like to wear the Hoka Mach X even if I'm doing a trail workout. But as I mentioned before, I also like to sprinkle in the Hoka Tecton X2 or the 3 as like speed workouts on trail as well too. I sometimes, if it's a little bit more rocky and I'm trying to push the pace a little bit faster, I will use the Tecton X just because I do like the extra grip for sanity's sake, just in case like I, go on a rocky section and I slip or something with the road shoes or anything as such too. So I do like the Hoka Tecton X for that as well too. So by the way too, like with the super shoes, if you just want to do trail workouts and you want to be able to do that, but you don't necessarily want to race in it, like I think, yeah, like go for it. Go for the purchase on there. I think that's a warranted thing because you're going to be able to get better turnover, better recovery, better overall energy efficiency doing speed work on trail with that as well too. And so I will use that as well too. So I like to use the Mach X and then the Hoka Tecton X interchangeably for speed workouts on the trail. So again, the biggest thing with shoes though, I will say this too. The number one thing with shoes is that it's comfortable for you. So you just got to make the shoe you got to make sure that shoe is comfortable for you. So it doesn't matter if it's carbon plated, it doesn't matter if it's got a high heel to toe drop, like all that stuff doesn't matter. Like the number one thing that matters for you is the shoe comfortable for you over long periods of time. Once you find a shoe like that, it's great. Like that you're in a good spot. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on shoes and stuff, but I think that's the number one most important thing is don't try to like force liking a shoe just because it's flashy technology or anything as such. It's got to be comfortable for you. It's got to work for you. And I think that's going to be the most important thing for sure. All right, everybody. Hope you liked that Q&A episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you did. We're going to be posting another Q&A episode next week with all the other questions. And yeah, super, super grateful for you listening. We're going to do a lot more episodes like this. We got a lot more YouTube content coming out too in the near future. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, if you like this or you want any other styles of shows, feel free to leave a show note in the comments if you're on Spotify with any suggestions or anything that you'd like to see. And you can also reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Joe Corcione and would love to hear your feedback. And if you have any questions or need anything, always reach out. But anyways, my friends, I appreciate you. You are all amazing. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And remember, be a better endurance athlete every day. And we'll see you on the next episode.